I'm Jill Amadio, and this is Welcome to Our Home. We're here in the studio with 4 of our residents who are from different parts of the country, and they're going to give us their memories of America's most unique holiday, Thanksgiving. Tom, tell us about your Thanksgivings.
Well, my relatives have a lot to be thankful for on Thanksgiving because, well, let's start at the beginning with an Indian boy by the name of Squanto back in some time before 1620. And Squanto and his friends were playing on the coast of what's now Massachusetts, and they were captured by some Spanish fishermen who took them to Spain and put them in a cage and took them around and showed them off at various fairs and that sort of thing. Come see the natives of North America. And then they sold them as slaves, and at least one of them were purchased by a Catholic order, presumably to preserve them, and then stayed there, learned Spanish, but Squanto wanted to go back to his native land. It was very hard to do. And they were reluctant to give them to Spanish sailors to take back because of their previous experience. So they figured a way to get them to England, and Squanto became a servant in an English home for a while. And then took actually several trips to the New World, and finally got on a fishing boat that took him back to his original village in what's now Massachusetts. But when he got there, he found out that there was nobody there. The entire tribe had been wiped out by disease at that point, so he stayed with another tribe. Well, now let's go back to England and think about the Pilgrims. They were separatists, which means that they'd kind of given up on the Puritan idea of purifying the church, and they decided they had to start their own church, which was illegal, and they were meeting illegally and got caught and got into all kinds of trouble, and they eventually escaped to Netherlands. And after a few years, they realized their kids were speaking Dutch and better than English, and they were growing up to be Dutch, and they didn't like that very much, so they decided, no, let's go to the New World. So they went back to England and hired, they purchased a ship called the Speedwell, and they hired another one called the Mayflower, and set out later in the year than they should have. They got some investors to pay the costs, and so the Speedwell proved to be an unworthy ship, so they had to go back, which further delayed them. So it was too late in the fall when they finally left. They got hit by a tremendous storm in the ocean. One of the young men on the ship by the name of John Howland, he was possibly a teenager, and it just got too rank below decks as the ship was tossing so much and people were vomiting and it was nasty. So he decided to go topside, and he gets topside just in time to get washed overboard by a wave that broke over the top of the ship. And he was able to cling on to some rigging of the ship, and the sailor was able to get him back on board using a gaff. Didn't gaff him, but put it out for him to get a hold of. So by that thin margin, this guy lived. They arrived way north of where they expected to go. They expected to be in Virginia, and the storm may have blown them off course, or maybe the ship's master, Mr. Jones, it's thought that he was probably bribed to deliver them way north of where they were supposed to go. So they ended up on the tip of Cape Cod, and kind of went around the tip to what's now Provincetown, and went aground there, and looked for a place to land, and they found a place with a nice creek and kind of an empty area, and which came to be known as Plymouth, and they landed there and set up their town there. There was no time to build adequate protection for the winter, and so they had a terrible winter, and almost half of them died that first winter. Among those who died were Mr. and Mrs. Tilley, but their teenage daughter, Elizabeth, survived. And sometime later, she married John Howland. They had 10 children, and they were my 12 times great-grandparents.
12 times. So you can trace your ancestry.
Yes, and there are
directly back to the Mayflower.
And there are more than 1 million of us who are descended from John Howland, and they were a very prolific family.
Tom, tell us more about Squanto. Whatever happened to the man?
Right. Well, had it not been for Squanto, there wouldn't have been a first Thanksgiving, because after that difficult winter, an Indian walked into the compound and introduced himself in English, and he was the one who showed the residents how to grow corn and how to fish for eels and eat a lot of the vegetables and the native plants. And most important of all, he was the one who became their translator, and he was able to bring peace between the pioneers there and the Native American tribes around. And he actually lived the rest of his life with the Pilgrims.
Now, tell me about these Pilgrims. I remember in England, we assumed that they were rather Puritan-minded. And that's often why they were persecuted at home, and that's why they left.
Well, you're right, Jill. The Pilgrims were Puritans, but they were not nearly as bad as they've been portrayed. In fact, they got some bad press from Nathaniel Hawthorne and others, writing something like 200 years later. But they were separatists. The Puritans in general were trying to purify the church, because the church was very corrupt at that point. And so they were trying to make the church better, but the separatists had given up on the church and didn't think they could make it better, but it was illegal at that time for them to worship on their own. Whatever the king declared their religion was, that was their religion. They didn't really have any choice. So the Pilgrims were meeting in secret, and they got found out and got in trouble, and eventually they escaped from England. And long story short, they finally decided to go to the New World to be able to worship as they wanted to. But they weren't such radical people. They were followers of John Calvin in Geneva, Switzerland, along with many others like Presbyterians and Congregationalists and Baptists and Reformed and groups like that. And by the way, we also have a picture of the Puritans as wearing black. They didn't wear black. And wearing hats with buckles. They didn't wear hats with buckles. All of those things were made up later. We imagine that the Puritans were teetotalers, but they were not. They drank liquor, and early in their sojourn in the U.S., they made beer and drank beer. They brought barley seeds with them so that they could make beer. So they weren't quite as nasty a people as we imagine them to be.
Jean, tell me, where are you from?
I'm from West Los Angeles.
Ah, a local sort of.
Yes, a local one.
Okay, tell us about your Thanksgiving memories.
Well, my memory, one of the original ones, of course, when I was young, was Norman Rockwell's portrait of the family sitting together, grandmother, grandfather, grandkids, all wanting to get the wishbone from the turkey at the end of the meal. And for my mother, we brought out my grandmother's china and her silver, and definitely we were going to have a turkey. Norman Rockwell picture? Not so. When I was 6, my father died. My mother was left with an 11-year-old, my older sister, me, and a baby, 8 months old. So she was very stressed, very busy worrying, how am I going to keep my children in their home? She had no education, she had no training. I learned the deepest kind of meaning of Thanksgiving.
Oh.
My aunts came. Were they buddies? Come on, let's go help the family. They didn't talk to each other. So when Aunt Mary was in the kitchen doing the turkey, Aunt Edith was in the living room. When Aunt Edith was doing the dressing, Aunt Mary was sitting with me reading books.
Any reason for that?
I can only have guesses. Would you like to hear the guess?
Yeah, why not?
My mother had brought the girls, grandmother had brought the girls to LA. The rest of the family was left in Montana. Aunt Mary ended up taking care of grandmother. She did all the heavy lifting. And I think at one point it was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Edith, if you can't come help. However, when I say the greater meaning of Thanksgiving, it was Aunt Mary and Aunt Edith who came each the other every other weekend, helping my mother, keeping the girls in line, making sure we vacuumed and dusted and kept everything all straight, not to add more pressure on my mother, so that my mother was able to go and establish not one, but 2 businesses. She had a gourmet food line, and she became a floral decorator. And at the end of the, think of this woman, 36 years old, and she has all this on her shoulders. She did the wedding for Bob Hope's daughter.
Good heavens.
She worked for the musician, Lawrence Welk. Henry Winkler invited her to the studios. But it couldn't have happened without Aunt Mary and Aunt Edith. Aunt Edith was there making sure everything in business was kept in line. Gertrude, if you don't start charging more, you're not going to get Social Security.
Ooh, smart lady.
Smart lady. She came, she never married, lived in Long Beach, never learned to drive. So until she was in her 90s, she took the bus every other weekend to Los Angeles to help take care of us and help my mother with her business.
Wonderful.
My other aunt, Aunt Mary, came, and she always came loaded with books.
Oh.
I was the book reader. I loved it. She came literally until the day she passed away. I was at the curb there. I was in my 30s at the time. Mary, let me drive, because at this point she no longer drove. And so, Mary, let me drive you home. No, I can take the bus. No, I can take the bus. Instead, she took the cab to UCLA's Medical Center.
Oh.
So here are these 2 amazing women. Now, not only did I learn from that, Thanksgiving is what I get. I get turkey.
Yes.
I get family together.
Yes.
I learned that Thanksgiving is really giving. Unless we complete the cycle, and unless we learn how to give and make life better for others, we don't have the full message of Thanksgiving. And I see these people in the islands, in the Bahamas, being thrashed, totally destroyed, their lives. We were once welcomed. Can we welcome? Can we complete this circle of Thanksgiving?
That's a beautiful thought. Thank you so much. Sharon, you've researched turkeys. Is that correct?
Well, I did a little bit. I did the first Thanksgiving, and it really was in 1863 was when we declared Thanksgiving, and that was done by Abraham Lincoln. But before that, there was a Thanksgiving, and in that Thanksgiving, it was interesting. It was 1621, and they served waterfowl, venison, ham, lobster, clams, berries, fruit, pumpkin, and squash.
That's
no
quite
cranberry sauce because they didn't have any sugar. So, and it was outside, and it was for 3 days, and it was between the Pilgrims and the Indians, and there were no women.
Why was that?
That was sort of interesting. It was a gathering of men, no women.
Different today.
Very
when
different.
the women do all the cooking.
Exactly. So Ben Franklin wanted the turkey to become the national bird, but actually he lost on that, and it became the bald eagle. But it took 250 years for turkey to actually become the thing for Thanksgiving. And that was from a lady's cookbook called Gatti's. And she campaigned for a natural holiday and romanticized the idea of turkey. Now today, turkey is used a lot because it's a big bird and it feeds a lot of people. The U.S. is the world's biggest producer of turkey. And we have more than 250 million turkeys that are raised every year.
1 million of them goes here.
Right. And they come from Arkansas, Indiana, North Carolina, and Minnesota, and Missouri.
Where are you from?
I'm from Philadelphia.
Oh, okay.
And 44 million turkeys are eaten every year.
Good heavens. Tremendous. Now, were there any special foods that you prepared for Thanksgiving?
Well, we were kosher. So Thanksgiving was, we had no meat and milk together. So we didn't make any of the creamed things that some of the other people make. So basically we had turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, sweet potato casserole, and green beans with almonds. And then a pumpkin pie and a pecan. I didn't like pumpkins, so we always had a pecan pie. But the thing that was remarkable to me was that when I first got married, it was decided that I would make the Thanksgiving dinner. Now, I lived in an apartment, so my mother-in-law volunteered at her house. Now, I'd never cooked a turkey before, knew absolutely nothing, but as a college graduate, I figured, oh, you can find everything in a book. So I went and I looked in a book, and I made dinner, and I was scared to death because I had no idea what I was doing, and but it came out very well. And there were 8 of us there that night. Now, the one thing we always did in our family was to say thank you for what we were thankful for that year. And that sort of brought up all of the things that year that happened to people.
That's a wonderful thing to do around the table.
Yes.
Have everybody say what they're thankful for.
Right.
Yes, very nice.
Right.
Thank you. Terry, welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us your stories.
Well, we were the house where everybody came. We would wake up on weekends and we would just count the bodies sleeping on the floors and start cooking pancakes to feed all the kids. But Thanksgiving was no different. So our children would just collect people to show up for Thanksgiving. And our biggest Thanksgiving included about 20 individuals. And when they were in school, they would just invite their friends over. Their parents would go on vacation or what have you, and they decided that they wanted to come join us for Thanksgiving. So we brought all the souls to our house, and I didn't have enough dishes for all these people, so of course it was paper plates. And we had a huge table that my husband built. I always wanted a big table. There were only 4 of us in the family. Son, daughter, husband, wife, me being the wife. But it was a very big table. And we would add a couple to the table. And paper plates. And I always order, I'm from Louisiana. And it was fried turkey, which is delicious. But we couldn't fry our own turkey because too many people were burning their houses down trying to do their own.
Good heavens.
So you always had to order your turkey out if you wanted to have a home the next day.
You mean buy it already cooked?
Already cooked. Oh, yes, to be safe.
Yeah.
So I knew that we were going to have about 20 individuals. Now, I did make the black-eyed peas because I knew how to do that, and that fed a lot of people.
From the South, you would.
And it was cornbread, black-eyed peas, fried turkey. This particular Thanksgiving, It was 2 fried turkeys. They're delicious, by the way. So juicy and so delicious. And not as healthy as you would hope for, but really delicious.
Where did you get those?
Oh, there was a place in town that you could order your...
You mean this? You mean you did it here? You get...
Oh, no. I was in Louisiana at the time.
At the time.
Oh, yes,
right.
absolutely.
I thought you meant while you were living here.
Oh, no.
In the village.
Anyhow, it was the most scrumptious meal that you could hope for, with your cornbread with jalapenos in it, and the turkey and the black-eyed peas, and I do not like pumpkin pie, I do not like pecan pie, so apple pie was what we had. And we would have several apple pies that I would make with my helpers. And it was just scrumptious, absolutely scrumptious.
So you miss it.
I missed it. But most of all, I missed the people. Having them all around the table and the youth around the table. And it was just so much fun. And then everybody hung out and stayed the night and on the floor.
Yeah.
Of course, I did not have enough room for everyone to have a bed. My house was tiny. And breakfast the next morning, and it was just having them there and enjoying their company and knowing that they wanted to be there, and feeding breakfast the next morning. Once again, the pancakes flowing and the maple syrup, and it was just fabulous. And I wish I could do it all over again, but of course we outgrew it.
I have to say, that is a one-up on my Norman Rockwell picture. You've got the star.
I think the turkey is the star.
Yes.
The turkey was the star.
Yes, I think
But
so
I
too.
recommend a fried turkey to anybody.
Yeah. Thank you, Terry. I have a story too for everyone about Thanksgiving. When I first came to this country, it was very close to November, and I decided to bring my mother over from England to witness this great American celebration. And she was thrilled, and she helped me shop for all the decorations and the tablecloths and everything. And we had a wonderful meal, and she was oohing and ahhing about everything. 2 or 3 days later, it was time for her to go home. And she came up to me and she said, I wonder if I could take some of these decorations home with me. And I said, well, they don't have Thanksgiving in England. The event celebrates the Pilgrims escaping that country. And she said, oh, but I love everything that it encompasses. I said, okay, so we went shopping again, and I bought the little pilgrim candles and the paper plates and all the decor with the Thanksgiving symbols on them. Of course, everything was on sale, which was rather nice. So my mother took everything home to England. She had about a suitcase full of paper plates, everything. And she decided every year to have a Thanksgiving meal. And her friends were rather surprised at this, but they came and they enjoyed it very much too. And my mother read them part of the Mayflower, Thomas, the Mayflower story, and they had a great time. And then later on, a few years later, the Hilton Hotel in London decided to have Thanksgiving. So then my mother began going up to London on the train and enjoying a big Thanksgiving meal up there, and then she'd take the train home. And I was very pleased because she loves America and all our American rituals. And although Christmas, of course, is about the same in England, though not quite as commercial, and we don't get near as many presents. But and usually we get candy, box of chocolates. That's what children get over there. Anyway, that was my mother's story, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to it. Tom, did you have any rituals for Thanksgiving
Well,
when you celebrated?
we did. When I was living in my parents' home, my parents had a tradition every year of making mincemeat, and they had developed over years a recipe,
It's British,
family
you know.
recipe for mincemeat. Yes, well, my ancestry goes back to Britain, of course, and so I think there's about 20 ingredients in it, and they would can about 10 or 12 jars of mincemeat and make that many mincemeat pies between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So, and that was my father was not a cook at all, but he would help my mother grind the ingredients and prepare the mincemeat.
Yeah, it's delicious, and it's really not an American tradition at all. But it's really good. And if you really look around some of the grocery stores, you can find mincemeat pies.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing your stories with us. I know there are many other residents out there in our village who are going to have marvelous Thanksgivings, and we wish all of them a very, very happy Thanksgiving. Gobble, gobble.